Workplace stress is something that millions of Americans deal with on a daily basis. According to a 2025 Deloitte survey, it reveals that more than 80% of today's American workforce experiences productivity anxiety, and a high percentage experiencing stress and burnout, respectively, feeling the urge to have the need to perform, especially among younger workers who are attempting to prove themselves and move up the ladder of their respective companies, which can ultimately lead to a feeling of exhaustion and affect your psychological and physical well-being. For more than 20 years, my friend Michael Dugan has been teaching people how to perform under pressure. Not in theory, but in the trenches of real business leadership. He's got more than 20,000 hours as a professional leadership development trainer for businesses, including the largest auto group on the planet, and he's learned that success and the attainment of it comes down to belief. That's what inspired his book, Turning Snowflakes into Diamonds. He says, while we live in a time of AI automation rewriting the rules of work and people losing their sense of certainty and values, he's on a mission to help people rediscover their true selves. Even if it feels that the world is changing too fast, he does this through his Becoming a Diamond framework, which teaches people emotional mastery, effective communication, and self-belief, and how to transform life's pressures into self-belief and personal power. Dugan says that he's trained thousands of people on how to remain calm, confident, and resilient. And he joined me this week to have a deeper conversation on how emotional mastery can elevate effective leadership in life, at work, and beyond. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Michael, if you're ready, my friend, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to learn how you help people level up in life, my friend. Great to see you, and happy Wednesday to you, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. No, Michael, I wanted to start our conversation by asking you about how you help people rewire their thinking, because I know that you want to help people turn themselves from snowflakes into diamonds, my friend. So tell me about the work you do to help people and the difference it's making. My friend, I'm curious.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think it's a calling, and there's certain sayings that I'm sure your audience members have heard before, but one of them is awareness is the first key to change. And if you're not aware of something, you can't change it. And I'll give people the example of a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And then I'll ask them, what is your weakest link in relationships? Or what is your weakest link in your life? And if they stop and think for a second, it tells me that they're not aware of it. And if you're not aware of something, you can't change it. So some people, everybody has a different belief system. And oftentimes, a lot of our belief system we absorb from our cultures and our families of origin. And then also we have a genetic system also. So we all have programming from our genetics, programming from our families of origin. And so programming is a great metaphor to understand if it's true that we've been programmed, if that is true for you or makes sense to the listeners, then you can deprogram and reprogram yourself. And another word is wiring. And I give it a simple example with identification. And say you have a person, almost everybody knows somebody that says, I'm not a morning person. So that'd be an example of being identified with, I'm not a morning person. And I'd say, okay, so does that mean that you're not going to like mornings for the rest of your life? Is that what that means? Because they're identified with not being a morning person. And then I'd say, where was the first day that you said that? Where was the first day that you accepted that as being true? So we all have these beliefs about ourselves, and oftentimes they occur unconsciously. Well, when you're conscious of them, you can change them and you can rewire yourself if you choose to. So it's all about understanding that we've been programmed, and if you want to, you can deprogram and reprogram yourself into a diamond.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, tell me about converting pressure into capability and how that translates into leadership. Because I know that you have more than 20,000 hours of leadership training and coaching, my friends. So what does it mean to you to translate or convert pressure into capability, my friend?
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And so it's a reframe. And so the audience, some of them are familiar with a reframe, some of them are not. But a reframe is when you look at a picture and it has a picture frame on it, and then you put a different picture frame on it, and the picture looks better in the new frame. So a reframe is a perspective. I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, and there are snowflakes everywhere. And one thing they would say is that all snowflakes are different. And at 32 degrees, the snowflakes would melt. And then a diamond, what makes a diamond is pressure. So the reframe is that in life, as life gets more challenging, we use the pressure to make ourselves better. So that instead of being stressed by the pressure, we look at the pressure as a good thing because the pressure is going to make me a stronger, more empowered human being. It's going to give me more wisdom so that I have the ability to carry whatever my own personal message is.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, I know that you're on a mission to equip people with the ability to remain composed, confident, and resilient under stress, my friend. So, what's the key to doing that? And when we look at workplace culture, what do you think is the key to reducing workplace culture stress as well, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, thank you. It was what happens is there's simple sayings that I teach, and of course I've learned a lot of them. And the saying is how you do anything is how you do everything. So if you lose your temper in a minor situation, there's a fair chance you might lose your temper in a major situation. So every moment is an opportunity for us to grow ourselves or change our baseline. And like in the book, I have three musts, and I think these are must. One of the purposes of the book is to help people stay employed longer and be more valuable in the age of AI and robotization and dematerialization of business. And the first must is you have to be valuable because if you're not valuable, they're going to probably get rid of the people that are not as valuable. So value will keep you employed longer. And the next must is you must be adaptable. Well, this goes into your question. When you're emotionally regulated and you're in abundance, so your hormones are happy, you're more creative. But if your hormones are in survival, you're less creative. So when you can regulate your emotions and master your emotions, which a human being has that capability to emotionally regulate at that level. And then the third one is you have to fit in. When you're in an intense environment, I give the example of like most people have seen a movie or a television show with prison. And when people go into prison, they automatically separate according to color or race. And they do this because this is a survival characteristic. When people go into survival, they quickly try and survive because we survive better in groups. This is when people are in survival. So, like, say, for instance, if you're in the field of sales and the vice president is getting pressure to get more sales on, and that vice president is putting pressure on the general manager for you to get more sales, and there's less sales to be made, people are more likely to be petty, more likely to be scared, more likely to be selfish, more likely to be jealous. And at that moment, this is where a diamond shines, because a diamond brings the light. The diamond has the ability to stay stable amidst all environments. Going back to what I said earlier, if it's true, how you do anything is how you do everything. And if it's true that you lose your temper in a minor situation, you're going to lose your temper in a major situation, or let's say more likely, well, if you can stay calm in a minor situation, you're more likely to stay calm in a major situation. So when you're calm, you're now part of the solution and no longer part of the problem. So it's simply a decision. It's a decision to become a diamond. Like, what's going to make a human being a diamond? Well, nature will, God will, Jesus will, whatever, however you want to look at it. The people that are the strongest will probably survive and prosper the best. But some people make a decision to be a diamond. Some people make a decision that I am going to learn to regulate my emotions. I am going to learn to be stronger in all situations, and I'm going to learn to regulate my emotions from the inside out instead of the outside in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to talk to you now, Michael, about emotional intelligence and how it's tied to our personal and professional identity, because you believe that emotional mastery is a big part of success and being present, my friend. So how is presence, identity, and emotions tied together in your view, my friend?
Yeah, thank you for that. It was for me, I had won the Mr. Alaska bodybuilding contest, probably 25 years ago or so. And then I won it again the next year. And the reason why I share that with people is it took a little bit of discipline to win that bodybuilding show. And I did it without steroids. And I learned a lot of valuable lessons. But then after that, I decided to put the energy into working on my consciousness. Instead of working on my body, let's put on my consciousness. And I've been meditating 3 times a day now for 25 years, teaching myself how to be present. And at one point in my life, I was going through a breakup, and I wanted to get my brain quiet, because when your brain is quiet, you're not thinking about the future. You're not thinking about the past. You're completely present. And when you're completely present, you absorb more information and your awareness goes up, and your awareness is your consciousness. So your consciousness goes up. So I'm trying to escape the grief of this breakup. And I came out of the meditation and my brain was completely quiet, but my body still had grief in my bloodstream, because our feelings we have are created by the hormones. So I had to get the hormones in my bloodstream happy. And once I got my hormones in my bloodstream happy, I could maintain presence easier. Like if somebody has a habit of anxiety, well, you have anxiety in your bloodstream. If somebody has a habit of anger, you have anger in your bloodstream. And so where did you first absorb that identity of I suffer from anxiety or I suffer from anger management? This was an identity that becomes a loop in your psychology. And so for me, your ego wants to survive and your ego wants to be right. So every religion thinks it's right. There's religious ego. Every political party thinks it's right. There's political ego. And then there's human ego. The ego wants to be right because the ego wants to survive. The religion wants to survive. The political party wants to survive. So, of course, I have my ego, and my ego is not a bad thing. It's just a thing. But I believe that our vibe matters. And if I have an anger vibe, it's transmitting into reality. If I have a happy vibe, it's transmitting into reality. If I have an abundant vibe, it's transmitting into reality. So let's not say it's true. Let's just say if that's true, it's pretty important what you're vibing into your reality, because your vibration has an effect on your reality. That's my belief. My vibe has an effect on my reality. So if I'm vibing love, reality will reflect back to me what my vibe is. If I'm vibing hate, my reality will reflect hate back to me. If I'm vibing scarcity, reality will reflect scarcity back to me. So I'm so thankful when I was 23 years old that I made a decision to master my emotions. Because I tell people, as a corporate trainer, like you said, with over 20,000 hours as a trainer, I tell people kicking ass in the sacred game of life. Okay, well, what does kicking ass mean? Well, that's kind of cavalier. Well, what it means to me is a life with minimal regrets. If you have a bunch of regrets, maybe you missed the opportunity. And sacred, why do I call it sacred? Because I think a lot of people don't show up for their life. They don't fully understand the gift that life is. So I want to love my life and love all experiences equal and really enjoy every moment of it. Now, why do I call it a game? Because games are fun. So kicking ass in the sacred game of life. So if I have a bad attitude my whole life, it's going to skew my perspective. So what makes the quality of my life is my perception. So if I master my perception, I'm mastering the quality of my existence, changing my vibe. Healthy people live longer, epigenetics, different gene expression. They radiate positivity. At any given moment, simplistically, I say positive, neutral, or negative. So either you like me or you don't. And no problem if you don't. Not everybody's going to resonate with you. So at any given moment, you're helping the planet Earth or you're hurting the planet Earth. And I believe if your vibe is right, you're helping the planet Earth. And if your vibe is wrong, you're probably not helping the planet Earth.
Yeah, Michael, to that point, I'm curious to ask you about how you view the word inclusion when it comes to leadership. What do you think it means to be an inclusive leader, my friend?
That's a great question. It's a great question. And we'll grow and change. And I tell people, like when I said everybody thinks they're right, I think that's a basic truth. I don't know that it's 100%, but a lot of people think there's right. And there's lots of different types of leadership. And with leadership, there's leading by example and there's leading by title. An exemplary leadership is more powerful because an exemplary leader has more influence. A person that's leading by title, people will follow you because they have to, because they want to keep their job. So you're not as influential. And so in my life, I look at equality. When we're talking about inclusionary, in my perspective, we're talking about equality. And I say in sales, we'll use sales as an example. If I'm a salesperson and say I'm selling a movie star or a professional athlete and I'm looking at them like they're better than me, well, it's going to change the way I communicate with them. Or say I got a person that's really down on life and I'm looking at myself like I'm better than them. It might change the way that I communicate with them. So for me, nobody's better than me. Nobody's worse than me. You are equal to me. You are equal. And that's love. When I look at you with equality, I'm not judging you. I'm looking at you like you and I are one, and oneness and connection is a form of love. I'm not judging you. I'm just allowing you to be who you are. Now, here's the but. Here's the but with the inclusionary world. There's certain principles, in my perspective, in this reality, there's good and evil, or there's yin and yang, or there's creative energy and destructive energy. So there's two forces on this planet. So because we live in this world of duality, we have to understand how to play, remember the game of life, in the rules of duality. And in this universe, if you are more valuable, they're going to keep you longer. So now this is where you stand out. I tell people, when in Rome, do as the Romans. I give an example with my child and I say, what if I have a bunch of red ants on the ground and I take a yellow ant and I put it on the ground next to the red ants? And my child says, they kill it? And I said, well, I don't know about that, but they'll certainly notice that it's different. And so people notice you when you're different because we survive better in groups. Go back to the jail example I had earlier where people will categorically go to their cultures and colors to survive when they're less civilized. When you're more civilized, you can connect at a higher level. So in this world today, businesses want to survive, so they're going to keep the most valuable employees. So the point is that it's not a simple question to be an inclusionary leader, because in my mind, hopefully we'd find a place for everybody. Not everybody's designed to have this position. Not everybody's designed to have this other position. So maybe this position doesn't work for you. Let's find a place for you. But in the world, as times get tougher, they're going to keep the people that are the most valuable. And I think that's a hard truth to swallow. And that's just, I think, where we're at on the planet today. So understanding the little phrase I learned as a young man was always go the extra mile. Always go the extra mile. And I proved out that principle because when you do a little bit more, people notice you. And sometimes you want to be noticed and sometimes you want to fit in. And so you have to, so that's why I think humility, a humble leader is a righteous leader. A humble leader that leads by example and looks at nobody as better than them, as nobody worse. It's just life had given them this opportunity to lead. And they don't take it lightly. Like the Spider-Man movie, with great power comes responsibility. And they're not leading for significance. They're leading to help move. They're doing their job, but they're leading, they don't take it lightly. So that's a lot of answer there, Kevin. Hopefully it makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, I want to give you the space to tell me about the Diamond operating system and framework, my friend, and anything you wanted to share around that we haven't already talked about today, my friend. What do you want people to do?
Thank you. I think I had a calling. I was talking to somebody yesterday. As a young man, I had experiences in high school where I would have applauses. And then my dad introduced me to motivational speakers as a very young man. And then made a couple key decisions as a young man to be a nonstop learner, to master my emotions, as I said earlier, and to take care of my body. And so I've been learning for a lot of years now. And of course, a lot of the stuff I've learned, some of the stuff I've learned, I don't even remember where I've learned it from. And then I've learned from a lot of different beings on the planet, a lot of different books, a lot of different courses. And the Diamond operating system is a system for me as a trainer, training human beings. I tell them that my job is to sell you on yourself. And I said something to a class recently that I didn't normally say. A couple minutes ago, I mentioned humility. Almost, hopefully, you know what your gifts are. I'm saying to the audience, and whatever you like to do, it might be a gift. And understanding what your gifts are, and
All right.
they'll probably change as you get older. But I believe I'm gifted at selling people on themselves. So I'm gifted at helping people believe in themselves more than they already do. And I give this example with my wife. She was at a seminar online, and this one guy that was kind of arrogant said, I don't know why I'm here. I shouldn't have to be here. I'm the best in this company. And I giggled. And I said, I've met that guy 1,000 times. And then she giggled. And I said, he almost never knows anything. And she giggled some more. And I said, but he doesn't have to because he believes he's the best. And when you believe you're the best, you don't need to read the book. So when you believe in yourself, more than you already do, your life will change. And that's what identities are beliefs we have about ourselves. So the Diamond operating system helps people first be aware of how they're programmed, and then it gives them tools about how to change their belief system. An example is the Swiss Army knife. The Swiss Army knife. Me and my mom saw the movie 127 Hours with James Franco about a young boy that was a teenager that was riding a BMX bike. Maybe he's in his early 20s. He falls into a ravine. A rock comes down and traps his arm against the wall. He was there for 127 hours and he had to cut off his arm with a Swiss Army knife. But the Swiss Army knife, he said, was a knockoff knife. So he's telling his mom, he's saying, Mom, because he had a camcorder chronicling the experience. Mom, next time you give me a Swiss Army knife, can you give me a genuine one? So I saw this movie with my mom, and this is one I got from my mom, and she died in 2016. I love you, Mom. And so the body is like a Swiss Army knife. We have the body and the breath and the brain. These are the blades of the Swiss Army knife. And so when you stand strong, you feel strong. If you put a smile on your face, you feel happier. If you put your hands in the air, you feel happier. If you put your hands on your hip, you're going to have more testosterone. But then you learn to control your breath. You learn to box breathe like Navy SEALs do, hard focus breathing that will bring you into coherence, or you learn your brain. You learn how to direct your thinker to think about thoughts that are helping versus hurting. So that's an example of one of the frameworks. Another one is art, which is like making your life a work of art. You accept something and then you release it. And once you release resistance, you transform. Every human being has a baseline. So for true change to occur, we have to change our baseline. And our baseline is something we've been so long, it feels completely comfortable. But once you let go of one resentment, everybody, one simple resentment, it will change your baseline. So the first thing you have to do is accept it. And then once you accept it, you can release it. Just accepting it alone will release it. And then you will transform. Your perspective will change. You'll feel lighter. So then there's art squared, accept, responsibility, and transform. When you start looking at life from a position of responsibility, what it does is it empowers you. Because if you're not responsible, you're a victim. So you learn to take responsibility for the things that have happened to you in your past, even if they're difficult. So that's an example, Kevin, of 3 different frameworks: the Swiss Army knife, the body, breath, and brain; art, accept, release, transform; and then accept, responsibility, transform. Then there's other frameworks in the book. So the book takes them through turning snowflakes into diamonds through these frameworks. And then what it does is it asks the customer or the reader or the listener, if they feel like they'd like to, go to becomingdiamond.com. And then there's 30 days of videos called the 30-Day Diamond Sprint that's free. So every day they would have a little moment to get a recharge, to get a recharge, to get a recharge. And then after you do something enough, it changes your wiring. After you do something enough, you don't need to think about it anymore. It just becomes you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, you led into my next question about change. You mentioned some of it in your last answer, but I wanted to ask you specifically about change because you believe that oftentimes people struggle with change even if they're motivated. And I know that you propose it's not a deficiency in willpower, but rather our brains are inherently programmed for safety over growth, my friend. So how can we get more people comfortable with the idea of change? What are your thoughts there?
Thank you for the question. And that's basically the basis of the book, is that the human beings, the ego is resistant to change. And so when I said awareness is the first key to change, and then earlier I said awareness is consciousness, and so awareness and consciousness are the same things. Awareness is the first key to change. So I oftentimes ask audiences, what is your brain's or your ego's primary purpose? And very few people know that its purpose is to keep you alive, to protect you, or survival. And so if we're in survival, you could do one negative thing one day and do 100 positive things. And when you go home, you're going to think about that one negative thing instead of the 100 positive things. So when we're in survival, we're quick to demonize people, places, and things, and we're focusing way more on what's wrong than what's right. So if you look at your ego, like its job is to keep you safe, the brain and the ego love certainty because certainty means safety. So when we drive to work the same way each day, we think it's the fastest way with the least amount of resistance. It brings us certainty. When we go to the same restaurant that we like, it brings us certainty because we know they have quality food. Then we eat our favorite meal. That brings us certainty. And then we have our favorite friends. That brings us certainty. So certainty means safety. So the ego wants certainty and wants safety, and it does not want to go into the unknown. So certainty is the land of the known. So the same way to work is the land of the known. The same restaurant is the land of the known. The same food at the restaurant is the land of the known. But everything that you want that you don't have is in the land of the unknown. It's outside of your comfort zone. Certainty is your comfort zone, and outside of your comfort zone is the land of the unknown. This is where everything you want is in the land of the known, of the unknown. And so what happens is the ego wants to stay safe. So the ego is very resistant to change. Most people don't change unless they have to or unless it's imposed on them. So there's a simple saying, life will keep on giving you lessons until you learn them. And if you don't learn them, life will keep on giving you the same lesson until you do learn it. So some people recreate the same relationship problem, the same money problem, the same health problem until they finally recognize the only problem is them. And at that moment, they take responsibility and oftentimes they overcorrect. And I believe we do this as a culture. The culture recreates the same problem until they finally overcorrect. So oftentimes overcorrection is a normal part of change. And then sometimes people are forced to change. Say your employer makes you change. So now you have to change to keep your job. Well, the better you are at change, the better you'll do in this world. So when you make a decision to master change and that understand anytime you go through any change, your ego is going to feel frustrated. That's why you have to accept frustration. That's why whenever we buy different businesses, there's always fear at the new businesses that are being bought. And so I would have the team say, I accept frustration. Say that with me, please. And they all say, I accept frustration. And I say it again, please. I accept frustration. And say it again, please. I accept frustration. Because what I'm trying to teach them is whenever we learn something new, the brain has to rewire itself. This is the theme from earlier. And the brain doesn't want to rewire itself. It wants to do it the old way. So there's going to be frustration every time we learn something new. So the frustration is now a good thing because it's a natural portion of learning. And so the ego wants to survive. The ego wants to do it the same way. So the ego is, for most people's ego, not everybody's, is naturally resistant to change. And if you're aware of that, because awareness is the first key to change, now you understand, okay, my ego doesn't want to change, but my soul wants to change. My consciousness wants to change. And that's where you grow. Every time you come out of your comfort zone, you gain a new experience. And that new experience will bring you wisdom.
Yeah, and Michael, I'm curious to ask you about the growth mindset and emotional intelligence and how really embracing the concept of emotional intelligence can make you a better leader. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it was my birthday the other day, and I said to the people, I just did a quick video on social media, and I said, hey, everybody, it's my birthday. And I said, I got a couple questions for you if you're willing to play with me. And the first one I said is, do you have an open mind? And then I said, if your answer was yes, you can stay. But if your answer was no, I said, you can go. And so I asked them a series of questions. An open mind has a growth mindset. They have a more adaptable brain. But when you have a fixed mindset, if you're rigid in one area, you're probably rigid in a lot of areas. So a rigid brain does not adapt as well as a growth mindset. There's a famous author named Carol Dweck who wrote a book, I think, about growth mindset. The name's evading me at the moment. But basically, she's like a Harvard psychiatrist, and the difference from a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. An optimist will always do better in change. There's an acronym that I used to teach. I don't have it in the book, but it's the change code. And the code is that you want to be courageous and confident going into change. And then the second one is you want to be optimistic. You want to be optimistic because an optimist will always do better in change. So an optimist embraces change, but a pessimist doesn't want it. So when you combine being an optimist with a growth mindset, that's a recipe for a person that can master change. That's a person that's going to understand that change is a natural part of life. And the better you get at change, the better you'll do in life. And so when you understand that there's certain life skills that make your life easier, and that being adaptable is something that will make your life easier versus not being adaptable. When I said earlier, a person that says, I'm not a morning person, there's a lot of people that have an identity that I don't like change. Well, that identity is not going to help them change. They might want to consider saying, I used to not like change, but I'm learning to embrace it, just to soften it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, I know that you have said in the past, and you've said in this interview, that your frequency is your currency, my friend. And that's how we stand out in the world. And I'm also curious to ask you, how does that philosophy sort of meld itself when it comes to high performance and identity and emotional leadership. So how can we get high achievers to really lean into their emotional intelligence to maximize the effectiveness of their leadership? What are your thoughts there?
Um, that's an intense question, and I just want to let me reframe it to make sure that I understand it. It's You're saying, how do we get leaders to be more emotionally intelligent at the
Uh,
end?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And what for me, we are a mimicking species. Every human being has mirror neurons, so we mimic what we see unconsciously. If nobody on the planet had a tattoo, there'd be no tattoos. The reason why somebody got a tattoo is because they saw somebody with one, and then we mimic it. So we're a mimicking species. That's why I said earlier with leadership, exemplary leadership is, I think, the greatest form of leadership because your people will mimic it. They'll mimic it. So if you're a challenging human being as a leader, the people will mimic that challenging behavior. And so people have mirror neurons, but they're not aware that we learn through mimicry unconsciously. It's like we're a conforming species because if we conform, we live better. So I call it, in the book, I call it the proximity prime. When a person takes responsibility for their proximity, like right now, it's you and me in this room. So I am responsible for to have the highest vibration in my room, the highest level of awareness, the highest level of consciousness. Remember, nobody's better than everybody, but I'm responsible for holding up the frequency in that room. So say I have a leader that maybe they're not very emotionally intelligent. My job is just to be kind and loving to them in spite of wherever they're at. Where a person's at is where they're at, and not to judge them because if I'm judging them, they're going to feel it. They're going to pick it up with their sixth sense. So my job is to be the example for the leader because the lead where a person is where a person is. And if everybody can look at themselves like you're an example and people are picking up your example unconsciously and you just learn to live with non-judgment, which is difficult because the ego wants to judge, and just learn with a high rate of acceptance, which makes your life easier. Let me give you one more portion to this answer. If you look at everybody at a workplace like a gear, like you have a watch with all the gears on it. Have you ever seen
Mm-hmm.
a watch? And what happens if one gear stops?
The watch stops. Yeah.
Yeah. And so everybody at a workplace is a gear, and that one person with that is a gear has a lot of resistance. They have a lot of pain and a lot of anger. Every gear that touches it slows down. So if you get a leader that's a gear that maybe they lead by fear and they lead by anger, they have an effect on the whole dealership because now the people are in survival. They're doing things grudgingly. So he's not lifting people up. He's actually suppressing them and pushing them down because he's acting out of survival. So if you have an opportunity to teach, like teaching is a skill. Not everybody wants to learn from me. Not everybody wants to resonate from me. Some people, their ego won't allow them to learn from me. Some people want to be their friend. But the one way I can teach everybody is with my example. And the other way I can teach them is with my vibe. How's my vibe? Am I hating on them or am I loving on them? And so when you're at the workplace with these leaders that maybe lack emotional awareness, is if you choose to be a diamond, that's a highly conscious human being that's very valuable, very adaptable, and understands human dynamics. You will be the example for that leader, and you will have an effect on that leader whether they want you to have an effect on them or not, because they're going to pick up your example the way you operate in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael, I'm a big believer that any organizational culture starts with its people and investing in the success of the people that you're in charge of leading, my friend. So, under that framework, I'm curious to ask you about cultivating an organizational culture where everyone is sort of rowing and working towards the same shared vision, my friend. So, in your judgment, my friend, as leaders, What's the first step to really establishing a robust organizational culture? What are your thoughts there?
Gosh, great question. I mean, when you say the first step, I think, wow, the first step is increasing the organizational awareness, and teach people how people operate. And it's been said that, like, sometimes in industries, CEOs or founders of corporations, they can have a level of awareness, but some people are gifted in some ways and not gifted in other ways. They might be gifted starters, but not gifted finishers, or they might be gifted in creativity, but not necessarily human dynamics. So it's finding systems. If you look at an organization like it's an organism, so the system is an organism, it's a living organism, and either it's healthy or it's not. So if you look at, like, the human beings that I said were gears, well, now they're part of this living organization or this organism. They're either helping it or hurting it. If your people don't want to come to that place of employment, they're not going to do as good. Their vibration is not going to be good. If they're dreading it every day and they're coming there because they have to, they're not going to do as good. And so, metaphorically, with the gear, they're a gear that's not optimized. So an optimum organization is going to have optimized human beings. And these optimized human beings are going to learn to optimize with the technology, because that's where the earth is going. So this is where it requires increasing the awareness of the leadership all the way down to every employee to understand about the power of how we operate as a species. Most people don't understand that they don't even know that we're a species because they're too busy thinking. But we're a species, and we have species specific traits. And everybody has a different traits, and understanding that we're a species and we're unified, we're the same species, but there's differentiations between us. And so getting everybody optimized, if you can do what you love, you're going to do better. But not everybody gets the luxury to do what they love. So if you can teach them how to love, that's a superpower. If you can teach them how to love, just the fact that they get to contribute and let people know that they matter, because it feels good to contribute to something, getting a greater vision. So the first thing was education, systems and processes, and then teaching people that they matter. Give everybody a purpose in the organization and understand that they're an integral part of the organization and they matter.
Yeah, absolutely. But friend, you also said that most employers rather, are unprepared for the evolving demands of workplace pressure, my friend. So how do you think we can reverse the thinking and ingenuity of employers today so that they can better meet the demands of today's workplace culture? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, there's another great question, Kevin. Thank you. And so for me, it's once again, it comes down to education. My perspective is, like, there's a movie called Oppenheimer. Did you see Oppenheimer? Are you aware of it?
I'm aware of the movie, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody wanted the atomic power. Well, that's a metaphor for AI. So every country wants an AI, every corporation wants an AI. And if Amazon could have a bunch of robots, would they have robots or humans? They'd probably have robots because they wouldn't have to pay them vacation. They wouldn't have to give them time off. There wouldn't be any HR complaints. And that's just the world where we live in. So the point is that the earth is moving fast, and the people are going to be struggling if they're not aware to keep up with the changes. That's why the employees need to educate themselves. And that's where there's a motivational speaker that I listened to as a young man. He's a sales trainer, very practical. His name was Brian Tracy. And he had written a course called The Luck Factor. But in The Luck Factor, he says, luck is what happens when proper preparation meets opportunity. So luck is what happens when proper preparation meets opportunity. So if I was to say to the listeners that life is going to give you opportunities, the only question is, how well did you prepare yourself for this opportunity? Because if you prepared yourself for it, this is like auspicious or synchronicity, where life gives you this opportunity, but you're prepared for it. you're ready to plug and play. So for the sales, for all the people that are workers, your job is to prepare yourself. Your job is to be prepared and be more value and use the ingenuity. Like when I talk about AI, some people demonize it and they're scared of it. Well, first of all, we're programmed. We're programmed by movies. We're programmed by Terminator. We're programmed to be fearful of it. And I'm not saying that that's not wise, but I'm saying something can be good and bad at the same time. And the point is, if you don't use it, your coworker might be. If you don't use it, your competition might be. And I was watching an episode of South Park, and in the episode of South Park, a cartoon show, you saw these little girls in a circle, and they were oohing and ahhing, and they're going, oh, oh, ah, oh, and that's so romantic because this boy was giving this girl just such romantic text. And then they went over to the boys and he's texting on his phone and they said, what are you doing? He says, I'm using AI. I'm using ChatGPT-4 to respond to my girlfriend. And they all giggled. So then the other one started using ChatGPT-4 to respond to his girlfriend, and then he turned a corner. Then they went to the teacher, and the teacher said, wow, these kids are really brilliant. They're doing better papers than they ever have. And the principal goes, yeah, that's because they're all using ChatGPT-4 to write their papers. But the principal goes, the good news is you can use ChatGPT-4 to grade their papers. Well, this episode of South Park came out in 2023. You know what I mean? So now we're almost one day from 2026. And so you want to use whatever tools life will give you to make yourself more valuable, to educate yourself, to make sure that you can stay sharp and be the example at your dealership.
Yeah, and Mike, I've got three questions left for you. And the first of those three questions is this, my friend. I wanted your opinion on what's commonly referred to as the always on culture. And, according to according to data from the American Institute of Stress Study, 38% of working Americans today feel compelled to respond to supervisors or colleagues regarding work matters outside of work hours, with Gen Z and millennials experiencing the most pressure to do so, my friend. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on those findings and what implications do you believe that holds for the work culture today in America, my friend. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one thought is that every generation thinks differently. So Gen Z is the first generation to grow up completely on technology. And so Gen Z is a very intelligent generation that might lack wisdom because there's so much information and information is free, it loses its value. And so Gen Z, if it's true that they're the first generation to grow up completely on technology, they're very, very intelligent, but they might lack some wisdom in some areas, and there could be a sense of urgency where they might feel entitled. And then you get the people that are the next decade, the next decade, the next decade. So every decade thinks a little bit differently because they grow up with a different set of programming. And oftentimes the ego wants to revert back and they judge people against, the way they grew up, which isn't necessarily fair because these people grew up completely differently. So on the on-call culture, it's having the ability to flex. And so for me, I flex because I understand the game. I say this, if you want to play in somebody else's ballpark, you have to play by their rules. So if you want to play by a corporation's ballpark, you have to play by their rules. So if you want to play in your boss's ballpark, you have to play by their rules. So what are their rules? These are the rules they have for living. So say, for instance, somebody grew up in the military and they said, if you're not here 15 minutes early, you're late. But you roll in every day 5 minutes early and you think you're early every day, but they think you're late every day. So now every day they're giving you judgment and judging you as being a slacker, but you think you're doing fantastic because you're there 5 minutes early. So this is increasing human awareness. And the on-call culture, if that's what it takes to keep your job, I'm saying you better be on call. But the point is, the other point to that is setting boundaries. Because setting boundaries is a skill. And sometimes you have to have difficult conversations. And so, say my boss has a rule that he expects me to answer my emails and text messages 24/7. So now I'm in the on call generation, and I say, hey, with the highest level of respect, I just want to let you know that there's nothing more important than my family when I'm at home. And because I'm putting so much at work, if I don't text you immediately, it's no disrespect. I'm not disrespecting you. I'm just at my kid's game, or I'm at my kid's, doing homework with my kid, or I'm spending time with my family. So now what I did is I set a boundary with a why. And so boundary setting, sometimes you have to be tactful. So my thoughts are, it's just where we're at on the planet today. This is where we're at. So our job is to be able to adapt into the situation. So my thoughts on it, if I have a boss that expects me to be on call, I either have to be on call or I have to be able to set a boundary diplomatically enough so that they can receive it.
Yeah, and I just want to follow up with a question on burnout because more and more American workplaces are experiencing burnout today, and a Deloitte survey actually revealed that 77% of U.S. professionals have encountered burnout with an elevated level of stress, which adversely affects their work performance, my friend, and I'm sure you're not surprised about that, but I'm curious about the way you view the role of stress and how it affects work performance, interpersonal relationships, and your overall thoughts on that 77% number, my friend. What are your thoughts then?
Thank you. I mean, the first one is to master the present moment, and that's learning how to get your brain quiet and your hormones quiet. Because imagine that I have 8 plates above my head, and one plate is issues with my kids in school, another plate is issues with my relationship, another plate is issues with my body, another plate is issues with my workplace, another plate is issues with my dog, another plate is an issue with a family member. Every issue we have drains our energy. So the more plates you have spinning, the more likely you are to suffer burnout. So you have to be, there's a saying, if you want to make your bed, if you made your bed, you have to sleep in it, but you want to make it at least comfortable enough so you can get some sleep. So anytime you can set one plate down, you're going to have a tiny bit more energy. That's one thing, is if you can control, if you're lucky enough, you don't always get the opportunity to minimize your plates. But sometimes somebody that has so many plates that are spinning, you want to be able to reset yourself. You want to steal time in your life to reset yourself. You want it, so that's why I meditate 3 times a day. I'm resetting myself in the morning for my day. I'm resetting myself midday at lunch, and so I'm constantly resetting myself, calming my Swiss Army knife down through body, breath, and different meditations I've learned in the years. The other one is learning to find purpose. When you see a person that has purpose in their life, they walk differently than a person without purpose. A person with purpose is enthusiastic about living. A person without purpose is not enthusiastic about living. So when you find a purpose, such as something simple, like very, very many years ago, I wrote down on a piece of paper that my job is to do my part to save the planet Earth. Okay, so that's like 30 years ago I wrote that down. So my job is to do my part. Not, who knows, I touched 3 people. My part to help the planet Earth. That makes sense to me. Do I want the Earth to be better than me or worse than me as a result of me living here? I want it to be better. So that gives me purpose. So now that purpose gives me enthusiasm. So now I have enthusiasm to get out of bed. Now I have enthusiasm to bring the positive energy. So what that does is it changes the way I engage with life. So if you don't have a purpose, you're more susceptible to burnout. And so then I want to add one other word on this, and I know we're getting down to the last question or two, is being devoted. So discipline, and when you put love and discipline together, that creates devotion. So if you give yourself permission to matter, when I say, is it possible that you're more powerful than you've ever considered? Is that possible? And most people will say yes. And I'll say, okay, well, give yourself permission to consider that. Then there's the other saying that I referenced, but there's a new ending. How you do anything is how you do everything, and everything matters. Does your hair matter? Yes. Does your clothing matter? Yes. Does your mood matter? Yes. Do you matter? Yes, you matter. And that's what I'm saying is everybody here matters. Everybody here makes a difference. Everybody here is more powerful than they can possibly imagine. You matter. And so you make a difference. So if you understand that you matter, this could be your new purpose. Your purpose to be could be more conscious and be helping the planet Earth instead of hurting it. If you think that I'm 1 in 8 billion, I don't matter, I'm going to beg to differ. You do matter. Every human being matters and makes a difference, and that purpose will help alleviate burnout because you're going to have enthusiasm and you're going to have more awareness and you're going to get your body out of survival and you're going to start finding abundance rolling your way. So that's a lot there, Kevin, but hopefully it helps a little bit.
Yeah, and Michael, my final question for you this afternoon, buddy, has to do with personal and professional legacy and how you want yours to be defined, my friend.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And so for me, I love the idea of giving to give. And a lot of people know about the law of reciprocity. If you give 10% and you tithe, you'll get it back from God or the universe. Well, in a way, some people might be giving 10% because they want something back. But when you give to give, you just give to give because it's in your heart. I think it's pure because you don't have an expectation of return. You just give because it's wired into you. And then sometimes I say a gravestone as a person's last ditch attempt at immortality. They want a big gravestone so they can say Michael was here, or maybe I want the book that so Michael was here. Michael Dugan was here, he helped, or turning snowflakes into diamonds was a movement. And I would hope that I could be humble enough to not care. I would hope that I could become humble enough to just serve God or the universe or Jesus or Buddha or Krishna or Hindu or if you're atheist, just to serve. I'm just here to serve. And my hope is that that's enough. It doesn't matter if anybody remembers me the second after I'm gone. All that matters is that I gave like nobody's business and I lived like nobody's business.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, my friend, tell me if people want to get connected with you and the good work that you do, what's the best way they can do that?
If you could support, given my book, if I resonate with you, Turning Snowflakes Into Diamonds, you can find it on Amazon or Audible. Or if you want social media, you can find me on either Michael Timothy Dugan on YouTube or Turning Snowflakes Into Diamonds on YouTube or Turning Snowflakes Into Diamond on Instagram or on Facebook or on TikTok. And those would be the best ways to reach me. If you message me, I'll reach out to you. But if I don't resonate with you, that's okay. Find a teacher that resonates with you and just keep on growing and nothing but love and respect for the listeners.
Well, absolutely. Leadership is an ever evolving conversation, and I appreciated the one that we had this afternoon on the subject, my friend. I want to thank you for your leadership and clear-eyed vision on the subject and for engaging in conversation with me this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Absolute honor, Kevin. Thank you for your super thoughtful questions and your love and your kindness. I appreciate you, my friend.